everyone, and welcome to another community conversation on the health crisis in WHO.
Share all the resources of personnel.
That's a great
Another
question,
element
and I would
respond as
recommend
well.
to
We're
get
thinking outside the box, trying to come up with
hospital
new
setting.
ways
And
of
as
moving.
you already mentioned, the city is
Let's try to keep these numbers from doubling.
At over 33%.
Hope you're watching at home.
First, I want to say thank you for inviting me to the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Facebook Live Community Conversations. I'm Mayor Eric Papenfus, and it's good to see you. We're a little late getting out of the gate here this morning. We're trying to bring a number of people in from different areas, and I'm joined in the studio for a change by three of Harrisburg's finest. We have Lieutenant Milo Hooper, Corporal Joshua Hammer, and Community Policing Coordinator Blake Lynch. We're going to have a conversation with them about community policing, what we're currently doing, what we're planning for the future. And remotely today, we're also joined by Jen Wintermeyer of Tri-County. She's going to talk a little bit about a new partnership we have planned for South Allison Hill called the South Allison Hill Safety Project. And we are joined by City Arborist Ellen Rome and Facilities Director Dave Baker live in just a minute from Camp Curtin, where they are out planting some trees. I do want to begin, however, with a couple general announcements. And as we've done in past weeks, I think it's imperative that we start with the latest scientific data from BioBot, which gives us the analysis of COVID-19's prevalence in our wastewater here in the city and in the region. I think, Momin, you can bring up the latest graph, which is incredibly alarming. It shows that the spike has now exceeded the levels that we were experiencing back near the start of this epidemic in May. We are through the roof. Now, this is based on the actual prevalence of the virus in the wastewater. What that graph means is that they estimate in Harrisburg that we're experiencing 140 new cases of COVID-19 every day in our capital area water region. And it puts us off the chart in comparison with normalized virus concentrations to the other several hundred municipalities in which they test. We are literally in the 95th percentile of concentration, and our not normalized virus concentration trend with new cases is also off the charts. All that is to say that we are very much in the midst of what was predicted, but is a very serious fall spike in COVID-19. And people have to continue to take precautions. It's possible that things could get significantly worse before they get better. I know that there was some positive virus potential vaccine news this past week. There are a lot of people looking forward to the spring and the summer and getting to the other side of it, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we're very much in a crisis right now when it comes to COVID-19. So continue to practice social distancing, wash your hands, wear a mask, be smart and sensible, and we will get through this together. But that is the data, and it is sobering for sure. On more positive announcement news, I want to let folks know that we are going to be having a socially distant and safe holiday parade this year on Saturday, November 21st at 10 a.m. on City Island. We're having the reverse holiday parade. And I've talked about this a few times, but it's called a reverse parade because the parade participants will stay still all throughout City Island, and you, the viewers, will get to drive through and experience the parade. I'm looking forward to that. We've got treats for everyone who comes. It should be a safe way to do a sort of drive-through holiday extravaganza. And I hope people will mark their calendars for Saturday, November 21st. Also, coming up on December 8th, and we're going to have a future show on small business and business development in the city, but I wanted to make an announcement that we're going to be having a virtual workshop presented by Google in conjunction with our Director of Business Development, who is Jamal Jones. And it's going to be focused on how local businesses can get on Google Search and Google Maps and basically get their information more readily found by potential customers. So that's coming up on December 8th. More to come here on Facebook Live. Also wanted to give everybody a general sense of timing for the budget. We are about a week and a half away. The budget will be presented to City Council on the 24th. our budget will then hopefully get adopted by mid-December. And the Commonwealth is also on a tight clock in November for their budget. Budget negotiations are going on. Those impact all of us as well. And there'll be a lot of news with regard to budgeting. As I've said in past shows, and we're going to have a future show that will really go through the budget. But since we have sizable reserves that we've built up over the past several years in the city, we're going to be able to weather the storm of COVID, even though we're anticipating that revenues will be down for next year and really won't start to recover fully until the following year, or even the year after that. So those are some general announcements, and I thought it would be fun to go live today to Camp Curtin, in part because we have an exciting street tree planting activity that's been going on. And we'll see. I know that our facilities director, Dave Baker, is there live, and I think he may be there with our arborist, Ellen Rome. But I want you guys to tell folks a little bit about what's going on today and what's happening. It's a beautiful fall day, and a beautiful day, I imagine, to be out there planting trees. Take it away, Mr. Dave Baker.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you said, we are out here behind the Y at Camp Curtin here in Harrisburg. We have a total of 26 volunteers over the next 3 days working with our city forester, Ellen Rowan, which you guys can see in the background, hopefully. We actually just got done showing our first round of volunteers, the proper ways on how to plant the tree. Ellen is going over everything with them and making sure they're successful with all the trees. They're going to be planting a total of 30 trees in Camp Curtin. These are all trees that we let the residents of Camp Curtin pick out that are appropriate to plant in the areas. None of them will get too big, and it should be a real beautification effort by the time everyone's done. Really, hopefully, make everything look a lot nicer out here after they start establishing and growing.
Well, that's great, Mr. Baker. Thank you. Thanks for all the work, and thank the volunteers on my behalf. It's terrific. Do you want to just talk briefly about another program that you have, which is currently able for folks to avail themselves of that would potentially lead to tree trimming and tree removal for individuals that perhaps couldn't otherwise afford that service?
Yes, absolutely. So we are now offering for a while supplies last, while funds last, basically, the ability for individuals, if they meet certain criteria finance-wise, to apply to have their dangerous or dead trees removed if necessary, or if they have trees that need pruning. And then we send out Miss Rowan here next to me, our city forester. She will assess the trees, and she will let our office know if they're appropriate, and then we'll have staff in the office go over the finance. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. We'll have staff in the office go over the financing side of things with the individuals. They can find all the information on the city's website, or they can call our 311 office to get one of the members of my office to give citizens more information on how to apply. But basically, in a nutshell, we're trying to remove the dead trees and the overgrown and dangerous trees, all while planting, nice, more appropriate size trees in the area at the same time.
That's great. And Mr. Baker, can Ellen tell us what types of trees are being planted currently?
What types of trees? This tree that we're planting here is an American hornbeam. It's a native tree, obviously, it's American. It'll be about maybe 30 feet tall. So it won't be too big, but it will provide enough. We'll provide some shade here for the family. We're also planting a lot of cherries, sort of a smaller tree, maybe 22, 25 feet tall, especially at some of the properties where the house is very close to the street. We don't want to plant anything that's going to get to be too big. So we're planting some cherries, we're planting Japanese tree lilacs. We've planted a couple of swamp white oaks on properties where there isn't enough space and no overhead wires. Planted one honey locust, also at a site that doesn't have overhead wires. So it's a mix of species.
Well, thanks for that, Ellen. And we'll let you guys get back to work because I know you've got a lot of work to do and a lot of volunteers. Again, thanks to all of them for their work. It's good to know that we have such variety in terms of the trees that folks can choose from. We have an expert who can help advise on what trees are appropriate and can also come out and assess the trees if you're concerned that they may need to be trimmed or taken down, and that we have resources available. So thank you all. We'll let you go.
Sure, thank you.
We are next going to turn to Jen Wittermeyer, Executive Director at Tri-County Community Action, and talk a little bit about a new partnership called the South Allison Hill Safety Project. And Jen, I'll set this up by saying a while back, some months ago, we met to talk about the escalating violence that we're seeing in our community, in part in this larger context of COVID-19. In which people are experiencing economic distress. The schools are, sort of closed for in-person learning, and there has been an uptick in crime. And one of the things that we want to see more of is partnerships between the city and community organizations that are out there making a difference every day. And we had a series of good meetings. This included groups ranging from Light the Hill to the Brethren Housing to Wild Heart Ministries, Tri-County Community Action, of course, the Housing Authority, LHAC, et cetera. And we talked about how the city, in partnership with those organizations, could work to make things safer. And I'm excited that we're going to be supporting and funding a larger safety project for the neighborhood through your sort of fiscal agency at Tri-County in next year's budget. But let's talk about it. And I wanted you to come on and basically walk us through the various aspects of the proposal and the types of things that people are going to be able to see moving forward in South Allison Hill. So welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. And we always appreciate the opportunity to partner with the city and with other community organizations around creative solutions. As you know, not only Tri-County Community Action, but all of the organizations that you named have been investing in and working in the South Allison Hill neighborhood for quite some time. And doing that work around the larger context of the resident-driven Heart of the Hill plan, in which the residents identified their values and their vision for this community, which were around safety, physical environment, community engagement, and youth development and engagement. And so understanding that context and understanding that there is an uptick in crime and that creatively we can all come together and pool our resources and our efforts, we came up with the Safety Plan Initiative, which really has four primary focus areas targeting the Hummel, Mulberry, Evergreen, Swatara Street kind of corridor. The first of which is improved lighting, so ensuring that street lights that are there are lit and that trees that are around those street lights are trimmed back appropriately so that the lights can actually do their job and light up the areas. The second involves increased security, so installing cameras on local businesses and homes, as well as ring type cameras on local residences, both to deter crime, but also allow the opportunity for the police bureau to access that surveillance video should crime happen. The next is addressing vacant lots and empty buildings. And so that involves boarding up some of those vacant structures with murals, but as well as reclaiming some of those overgrown and unkempt for lots. So removing the trash, removing the overgrowth, putting up residential style fencing. And all of those initiatives are really to reduce the number of crime opportunity areas in this residential community. The last initiative, quite frankly, is probably the most important, and that's around resident engagement. And so working with and training the residents who live in that neighborhood to become block captains or street captains, as well as developing and using technology to our advantage, developing an app where residents can share information in real time about what's going on in their neighborhood. And then that information can also be shared with officials as needed.
Yeah, thanks for that overview. I think we're really excited about this partnership. It's a great segue into the larger conversation we're having about community policing. And it's the sort of partnership which I think the city is looking to support and grow with all community organizations throughout the city, not just in South Allison Hill. But if we can help by funding that app, by providing some funds for the boarding up of houses or for the distribution of LED light bulbs or for the installation of cameras, we're going to do it. And I think this model can serve as a potential model for community relations moving forward. We're talking about a three-year project, and we're also looking at a sort of crime analysis component as well. And one of the things we won't get too much into today, but we're looking to hire as part of our new community services division, a new crime analyst who is really community focused. So would you like to talk a little bit about, what your hope would be for this program and how it might work to sort of improve things over the next several years?
Sure. So everything we do, we want to make sure is using data to inform that decision making. We don't want to just throw ideas at a problem. We want some evidence that the initiatives are actually making a difference. So using what we hope is your new crime data analyst folks, we'll be taking a look at the crime data in these areas before, during, and after the interventions, seeing what level of impact they've made on the crime happening in this area. And our hope is, and what research tells us should happen, is that crime should go down. The number of crime opportunity zones should go down, the number of resident engagements should go up, and that should all work to deter and move out crime. And if that happens, and the data will tell us if that happens, and then we know that this is a process that could be replicated in other communities across the city, and we know that investment was a wise investment. It should also tell us that if a particular part of the initiative maybe wasn't as impactful as we hoped it was, and what we can do, kind of mid-course to adjust that initiative to get that impact we were looking for, which is why it's a multi-year impact. It can't be a one and done. Go in once and hope that you fix the problems. It has to be something that's done over a course of time, and then look at that data and see what happens.
Well, thanks again for all of your efforts and all of the partner community organizations that have really gotten together and said, we're going to work together to make a difference and improve the community. So thanks again.
We're happy.
And if you can stick around, there may be some questions about the South Allison Hill Safety Project at the end of the program. But we're going to go in studio now. And I get to talk in person for a change to some of our guests. And we're going to start with Lieutenant Milo Hooper for the Harrisburg City Police. And it's not a secret, but you will soon not be Lieutenant Hooper. You will be Captain Hooper. And you are going to be in charge of our new division in Harrisburg, which is a community service division, which is going to be on par with all of our other divisions, whether it's uniformed patrol, et cetera. And there is going to be a new focus with new leadership and with a lot of resources being proposed behind you to improve community policing. So we're really excited about that. I wanted to start our conversation though today with a follow-up on the conversation we had earlier in the year about 8 Can't Wait, which was a initiative by mayors across the country, really promoted by President Obama at the time, to examine use of force policies in police departments and to try and have them conform with best practices that we were seeing throughout the nation. And when we did that, we discovered that Harrisburg's use of force policy was actually very progressive. We had already incorporated into that policy, 7 out of the 8, 6.5 out of the 8, depending on how you count. It was much different than use of force policies that we're seeing in larger cities where they still hadn't done simple things like ban chokeholds or talk about other aspects of use of force best policy. We did, however, note that there were some things that we wanted to improve, and we had a community conversation, and we opened up an email at the city of Harrisburg, and we had scores of responses from residents and citizens over the past several months. And we've had a number of internal meetings with the police department, with command staff, and we've basically rewritten the general order, not in its entirety, but in certain areas to focus on making it even stronger and even better. And my understanding is that that general order is now gone out and been received by the average officers, and we can talk about, the relationship between a general order and how that gets disseminated and communicated to our police. But I thought we'd talk about the changes this morning, and you could sort of help us walk through them. So I sort of grouped them in about 5 or so general categories, and the first one has to do with the issue of issuing a verbal warning. And we've strengthened the language here. It was always there, but it wasn't strengthened. And this was something that I've heard, we heard repeatedly from the community. We want to make sure that wherever feasible, there can be a verbal warning issued. So the language now reads under policy: when feasible, under the circumstances, officers will give the suspect a verbal warning before any use of force. Also, that is later on under the officer direction, and it is in the use of force continuum that we see as an appendix that all officers use and refer to. So can you talk about the use of force continuum generally and the issue of a verbal warning and when that's utilized and why that's appropriate?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me on your program, and thank you for the upcoming promotion. In reference to the use of force continuum, it's really a guideline for the officer that's coming in, whether they're brand new or if they've been here for 25 years. It's a guideline on what to do, how to do it, when to do it. It's like your roadmap before you had GPS. So when the officer, we start pretty much with officer presence. So when an officer arrives on scene in uniform, once they're recognized as an officer, that authority kind of starts where that use of force really. I mean, your presence is a form of force. And then it rises and it continues to go up and continues to go up, continues to go up. It goes up as the suspect or subject that you're dealing with, as they go up, you go up. One of the things that we did build in, and I know you said generally talk about use of force continuum, but one of the things that we did build in, it was already there, but we never really put it in writing, was the de-escalation portion of it. So what we did, we added in, as you go up the use of force continuum, and it's a stepping stone. So like I said, officer presence, then verbal communication, and then it goes up to maybe maybe mace or something like that, all the way up to deadly force. But as you climb the ladder, the object is not to climb the ladder. The object is to take steps back down off the ladder, get on solid ground, if you want to use that as like an example. So every step we take, with the de-escalation, we're trying to take a step back. And we only take a step up that ladder when the public takes a step up the ladder. We try not to go above that. So that's kind of what the use of force continuum is in general. It's just it's a way of knowing when to climb that ladder. When do I take the next step? Okay, I'm at this step. Should I go the next step? Should I jump a couple steps? Should I take a couple steps back? The goal is always to take a couple steps back. That's really the goal, and that's where de-escalation comes into play. I'm sorry.
No, excellent. And yeah, and the second bit of new language really revolved around the issue of de-escalation, and they go together.
Yes.
I'm highlighting the language changes in the general order. The public can read the general order and has read the general order prior to these changes. They'll be able to read the changes in the future when they go to our website and see the revised general order. But one of them has to do with stronger language on de-escalation techniques as well. The new language says communication with individuals who are not compliant with orders by establishing a rapport through appropriate voice intonation, asking questions, providing advice to diffuse conflict, and achieve voluntary compliance. Talks about techniques such as verbal judo, CIT, and it basically, as you say, at the same time, it defines the ladder, so to speak, and encourages people to take a step down. And I think that's important. In your experience on the Harrisburg Police Department, how do officers learn the techniques of de-escalation?
They learn it. There's just, it's kind of like regular life. You learn through, first of all, through explanation. We have a pretty intense in-house training course, as well as an intense scenario-based training course prior to hitting the streets. And then once you hit the streets, or once you become an officer on the streets, you continue to learn as you watch more senior officers. But it's built in the de-escalation portion of it. And if I may, I'm going to step back to what we talked about earlier about the verbal commands. And you had asked, why is it important? Verbal commands is important because it does several things. One, it's actually a form of de-escalation. It really is, because you're letting them know, like, listen, if you don't do this, this is what's coming. And it allows them to maybe take a step back, which will allow us to take a step back. But it also allows the person kind of get them to like focus on what's going on here, because sometimes, we get caught up in our own game and we don't realize what it is we're doing. And then it allows the public to understand that, listen, the police are here to help. They're not here to do anything but help. That's really what our job is. But when it comes to the de-escalation portion and the training side of de-escalation, it starts with the general order. And now that we wrote it into the general order, it starts with the general order. So when an officer is hired, they go through the academy. The academy teaches that stuff too, but we become more specific for the city because the academy is over multiple types of jurisdictions. So once they come in here, they do what, like I mentioned before, an in-house training. In that in-house training, you go over a lot of the general orders. And one of the general orders now, obviously, use of force is de-escalation. So they'll talk about that and how it works. And you'll see some videos on it. And we have a shooting simulator that you can use to de-escalate. If you de-escalate on a shooting simulator, the simulation kind of pushes back and comes back down, kind of takes the steps off the ladder. But then once they get into our training, which is the scenario-based training, that's brought into. So now we're actually having actors base their activity on what the officer does. If the officer doesn't de-escalate, the action escalates. And then after we stop, we'll go over the scenario and say, hey, listen, try this, do this, don't do this, or you did a really good job. You are a natural de-escalator. But it's just based off of practice. And then once you hit the streets, you go through an Ftl program, which is, for those who are not aware, it's a program where you're still training, but you're training with an officer who's training you. Our training actually takes about 1.5 to 2 years before you're by yourself. And so before you're considered a police officer per se. So while you're doing that, you get to watch the training officer do it. Not only watch the training officer actually can tell you, hey, listen, did you think about doing this? Did you think about doing that? Or you did a good job, kind of like reinforces what you learned in scenarios. And then in this job, like it's a career where you continuously are learning. So you will continuously pick up on how people interact with you and how people react to de-escalation techniques, how people react when you say something like on a calm manner, or how they react when you say something on a more aggressive manner. So the learning side of it, it's just a constant learning. It's just like life. You're constantly learning how to deal with life. So
yeah. And, I hope people that are watching this understand that we spent a lot of time talking and thinking about how we can make sure that the general order reflects the language and the message from leadership that we want. And so by putting in a much more direct and clear language regarding de-escalation, verbal warnings, that then becomes the sort of primary document from which every officer is going to go out there and do his job. So it's words that translate into action, and words and language are important. I want to turn to the main, one of the main changes that occurred, which was that we did not, prior to the 8 Can't Wait initiative, have the, one of the major components, which had to do with the duty to intervene. It was, when we said we had 7 of the 8, it was one that we were silent on. And we had a conversation about this earlier in the year where we talked about, well, it's everyone's moral duty to intervene when you see something which is not right. But we have now put it into the general order in a way which is clear and direct, and which was, I think, represents best practices throughout the country. And I'll read what it now says. It now says, when in a position to do so, officers shall intervene. Very clear. When they know or reasonably believe that another officer is using unreasonable force. Officers shall promptly report any use of unreasonable force and the efforts made to intervene via interdepartmental communication. So you not only have a duty to intervene, but you also have a duty to report. And that is, I think, an incredibly important thing. Now, when we discussed this before, you talked about how, people know what's the right thing to do. But how do you think that word change and the communication of that is going to impact policing in Harrisburg?
The duty to intervene, it's going to impact it per se, only because it's in that general order. And like I said, you'll learn these general orders. You go over these general orders in your in-house training. Is this something that we were doing already? Like we had this conversation a couple months ago. Yes, we're doing that already. We've had some examples of that being done. But the impact of this is now there's no question. It's not like, what's my moral standards versus what's Corporal Hammer's moral standards versus who Officer X's moral standards. Like, well, I don't think this is up to speed, or I don't think this is bad enough. Now it pretty much lays it out there and say, listen, if you see something that you reasonably believe is not right, you have a responsibility, not just a responsibility, because that's what we had prior to the general order. Now you have a duty to do it. You have to do it, or else you're going to be held accountable as well. And accountability is what I think this whole 8 Can't Wait is really all about. They want the officers, they hold each other accountable. Mm-hmm. So that really is the impact. I believe the impact is just the officer themselves now has a guideline to say, this is what I really need to do.
And sometimes, and I think there is a perception out there that, officers aren't going to, express their dissatisfaction with one another. And yet, even if you don't intervene at the moment, the requirement is that you write it up, basically, and you report it. And if you don't have that communication with command staff and with, just sort of up the chain, you're not going to be able to potentially retrain people, make changes or improvements. You're not even going to know about it. And I think that's why it's important to enforce this. Well, it's now a whole section of the general order called duty to intervene, in section 5. And I think that's important. The only other things I would highlight, there are other subtle changes. When we talk about the use of force continuum, it now says explicitly, the officers should use the minimal amount of force necessary to reduce the immediate threat. There was a continuum before. It's clearly implied that, but it now says it. You're not to use more force than is necessary. And the only other topic that we received a lot of comment on when we were talking about this had to do with shooting at or from moving vehicles, and that language I think has been strengthened. And it's been strengthened in a couple different ways. So in one way, it says officers should not knowingly move into or remain in the path of moving vehicles. And this may seem like an obvious thing, but I think it was an important change because if you make it very clear that you're not to put yourself in harm's way or move into the path of that is intrinsically a de-escalation technique. And then it also says that officers should be cognizant that their actions can contribute to a physically hazardous condition resulting in a deadly force situation. And while shooting at or from moving vehicles is not outright banned, it is really it is at a last resort is the language that it is used, and it's with all those circumstances taken into account. You want to talk about those changes just a little bit?
Yeah, we took a lot of time getting the wording right on that little section that we added in there about the officers putting themselves in the line of a moving vehicle, in front of a moving vehicle, or removing themselves. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth on, how we should do this. Should we not do this? And try to think of, scenarios where we could be handcuffing the officers. But in the end, we realized, and that's why it's worded the way it is that we do not want anyone putting themselves in a situation where they have no choice but to use deadly force. And not saying, I mean, I understand deadly force is part of the use of force continuum. Officers are going to eventually, maybe at one point, have to do that, but we didn't want it to be a situation where you're putting yourself in that danger. Not saying that's what you wanted to do, but we tried to eliminate that. So the main thing with that, I guess, would be it allows the officer to say, it's okay to move out of the way. It's okay. I do not have to stand my ground here. Like if I'm in front of this vehicle, it's okay to shift myself to the side. That kind of is where we were going when we kind of talked about that. It just, like you said, shooting into a moving vehicle or from a moving vehicle, and you can't put a total ban on that because there's always situations where deadly force is necessary. But we wanted to make it where if the deadly force is necessary, it's not because it's something that we have done.
That's right.
Put ourselves in that position.
That's right, and that, and that's that has happened before. And it is in the sense that if you're in the path of a moving vehicle and it's coming at you, then it is necessarily going to threaten your life, and then suddenly it's been escalated to a potential use of force.
Yes.
If you step out of the way, you're not gonna escalate that into the same type of situation. But I appreciate all the thoughtfulness that our command staff did in having the conversations and working on the language, in responding to the community's feedback. As I say, I got a whole binder full of public comments and emails and everything that came into this, and I'm very proud of our revisions that we made to our use of force policies. The final question: how would you characterize the reception? Because I know it has been, brought to the roll calls and brought to the officers. What's your characterization of how it's been received?
The officer that I have actually spoken to one-on-one, I take that into more consideration than just an open roll call because, sometimes you don't want to say things. Some of the things that came out that were important was the fact that there wasn't total bans and that we understood that there are possibilities that things can happen. But on the other side of that, the fact that, you can see that there was some time that was taken there was some time taken. We took time to make
Months.
it right.
Months.
Yeah, we took time to make this right. And so the officers could see that and could appreciate it just by the language itself. And also one of the things that was important, it didn't look like, it didn't come off as just a shoot from the hip type situation. It was like, oh, well, this 8 can't wait thing, let's hurry up and do something. No, first of all, like you said, we had 6.5, 7 of those already. And we just made them better and stronger, and they were well received. I haven't received any negative feedback from anyone in reference to these changes.
Good. And I think that's important. And it's important for people to hear that. And it's also, I think, important to realize, for everyone to realize, the purpose of this is the dialogue. It's the mutual understanding. It's the back and forth that hopefully, in a larger sense, makes Harrisburg safer. And I think it was a good experience. The 8 can't wait, and I'm glad the challenge was put out there, and I'm glad we rose to that challenge. We're going to turn now to Corporal Josh Hammer, who is here with our Community Policing Division. And we're going to switch gears a little bit and just give you an opportunity to give us an update on some of the things which our community policing team is doing. But I wanted to go back to sort of how we started the show with regard to COVID. And, we're experiencing another very serious spike, and it is intrinsically putting a lot of pressure on us. It's requiring us to be socially distant and safe. And, at the heart of community policing is that sort of neighborly interaction, and all aspects of our lives have been sort of put into a whole new framework of interaction due to COVID. So you want to talk a little bit about how it's impacted community policing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having us. We're experiencing the issues just like everybody else in the community. Our unit by design is to go out and engage with the public. And with the COVID issues, it makes it difficult, the social distancing, the wearing the mask. And we know how important it is to do our part with the social distancing and wearing our masks. What makes it difficult a little bit is some of the events that we had to get cancel, some of the engagements with the community that we enjoy doing. We had to postpone or cancel. We're trying to do some more stuff on Zoom, meet with some of the students via Zoom. But as you can imagine, that's sometimes a little difficult, and it kind of takes the compassion side out of it. We're trying to just listen to what's going on instead of reading body language and whatnot. But we're getting through it. We're hoping that next year we can put COVID aside a little bit, and as long as the numbers are going down, and get back to doing every weekly our barbecues and getting back into the schools where the kids are back full time. So we're very hopeful for that.
Yeah, it's so hard, and it's unquestionably, impacting our youth almost disproportionately, because the level of activities and things that they can engage in just aren't there. And frankly, learning online, it does not work for everyone, and it is very hard in many homes, in many situations. And it's but we're going to make it to the other side of COVID, and we're doing our best to make it work. Let's talk. Maybe you could give a little bit of an update on the Allison Hill Community Policing Station, because that is a topic that comes up continuously. And let me preface this by saying one of the things that we'd like to do with this reorganization in our police department and the elevation of community services, including community policing generally, is to also give it a more prominent role right in the main police station down in City Hall. So right across from the commissioner's office, which was previously engineering, we're going to have a very open and inviting community policing area. But one of the early steps in community policing was establishing this substation, and I think that folks would really appreciate an update.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to be at our new substation, 313 South 15th Street. So far, it's been doing well being up there in the community. We're open. We have some people coming through. We did hire a new office manager for that, so we're hoping to get her trained up to kind of be there the first interaction when people do come. We want people to feel inviting. We also want people to understand that that when they do come up, that there might not be an officer there at that point if we're out handling another call. So we also want them to understand that they may have to call 911 if it's an emergency. That just going up to the Hill CP doesn't mean that there's automatically going to be a police officer there. More likely than not, there will be, especially from the hours of 10 to 6. But we're excited that this new building and the amount of resources that were put into it, that we're right there in the heart of the community, that people feel comfortable to come. And if they have something to report to us, they feel comfortable that they can come in. If they want to talk about their experiences or what's going on around their communities, that's what we really want the community to feel comfortable coming to speak to us there, not always coming downtown, finding a parking spot, which we all know can be difficult at times. But there's something up there for them as well. We're going to have resources out front to give them information on the services that not only the police can provide, but also that the city can provide for them.
Well, that's great to know. And I think we're going to be able to take that up a whole nother notch next year once we get to the other side of COVID, but also, and we're going to talk to Blake in a minute, once we hire our community service aides and we really expand the capacity of all those that are involved in community services generally at the city. But here, as maybe a sort of final thought or question, we spent a lot of time initially with Lieutenant Hooper talking about use of force for all police officers. You're an actual community policing officer, and I'm wondering, ideally, community policing is a vision for for the department as a whole. But I wonder what specifically, how specifically your vision as a community police officer, somebody who's hired and whose responsibility is explicitly that. How your perspective is a little different. So talk personally about what community policing means to you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question. We were talking about with Lieutenant Hooper about de-escalation. Well, the start of that is community engagement. So we want to be in the community. We want people to feel comfortable with the officer right off the bat. So getting into these community meetings, getting to the events, getting into the schools, those things there are going to help us in the future later down the road. If there is some sort of situation or use of force might be in play, that maybe they have a relationship with that officer. So there's really no difference between the model of a patrol officer to a community policing officer. Our bureau is committed, the entire bureau is committed to community policing. And it's that community engagement. Our unit with our officers that are with the community may have some more time to do that, maybe have some more time to get out of the cars. They're not maybe going to call to call to call. So they do have time to do the engagements, to get to the meetings that the public has, to get to the events. Our big event, National Night Out, which we're very proud of. Those guys can spend the time there, and getting neighbors used to meeting neighbors. So it is important that our unit is out there, and, but with regards to the uniform patrol, it's the same thing. Our unit, our police department as a bureau is committed to community policing.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear your perspective, and we're really appreciative of all that you're doing. And we're going to turn now to Blake Lynch, our community policing coordinator. And Blake, let me preface our conversation by saying, you've been something of a one-person show here over the past as our sort of civilian liaison to the Harrisburg Police Department. And one of the things that we want to do for next year, and I talked about, promoting Lieutenant Hooper, is also elevating you into a new role in which we will have a whole series of civilians, not just one person, but a whole series of individuals that are going to be able to assist and help us build capacity and help us build relationships and do all the things that we want to see. Now, we're calling these positions community service aides. Now, they'll have to be approved in the budget by Harrisburg City Council, and there's going to be a larger discussion, and it's not all a done deal yet. But one of the feedback from the community was, first of all, we need to do more, and this is a way to do more, but also in a time where it is difficult to recruit and retain police officers, the idea of having more civilians involved in assisting the department as a whole, I think is a smart strategy and appealing one, and it's one that's used in other departments. It's not just new to Harrisburg. But why don't you introduce to the public the concept of the community service aide, and talk a little bit about what it could be, what your vision is, and hopefully we'll get people excited about the possibilities.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Mayor, for having us on. And it's really a great opportunity to connect more with the community. And I really love my job. I love the opportunity of being able to go out with officers and work alongside the officers and learn more about what their roles and responsibilities are, but then also on the other side, them being able to connect more with the communities as diverse as Harrisburg is. And community service aides, as long as everything's approved and moves forward, would be positions that would join the team of community services under that new division in the Bureau, and be civilians, which would work alongside of officers, but then also fill different roles that officers could assist more in policing and doing the main roles and responsibilities that these civilians could help take off of their plate. These are more engagement opportunities with the public, with community watch groups, with nonprofits and churches, with our crime analysts and help with reporting, as well as assisting officers, maybe on low-level calls, certain things that may not need necessarily an officer there in the immediate. However, just an opportunity to connect and learn more and grow. One thing about this role that I've been in for a couple of years, I've learned a lot more about the law, learned a lot more about how officers enforce the law. And this might be an opportunity for civilians to communicate that to the community as well, and why an officer may do something versus why an officer may not. What is a criminal offense versus a a civil offense. So those types of things, what may go to a magisterial district justice versus what goes to the county court. So there's a lot of things that we could help the officers and help the community as a whole with being civilians that would be really beneficial to the community as a whole.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about building capacity, that's something that can be very, very helpful. It's not a secret that we're having trouble retaining and recruiting officers. That our numbers, at least for our various patrols, are low and at a low point. And we want to grow that, but it's going to take time to grow that. And one aspect which attracts me to the community service aid concept is that it's potentially a way that people might grow and become interested in law enforcement as a career path. So make a pitch to people that are watching out there. Why might they want to consider becoming a community service aide for the city of Harrisburg, and how what sort of things might they learn, and how could this be interesting?
These positions are going to be an amazing opportunity for those who love to serve already. In a capacity in which they can continue to do so on behalf of the agency and on behalf of the city. You have a lot of people that love to serve already in nonprofit roles or volunteer opportunities. We have a lot of people from churches to nonprofits to just members of the community that want to engage, want to help, want to serve. And we want to make sure those people have that kind of heart as well. And so even if someone is kind of interested in law enforcement, and maybe just wants to see, the backside of it to a degree, this could be an opportunity for that. But really, people who have a willing heart to serve, that want to do good in the community, that want to engage pockets of the community that perhaps may not have the best relationship with law enforcement or with first responders. How can we build that bridge? How can we mend those rights? How can we change those things around so that they can then become an advocate and help others in the community, maybe from where they came from, learn and understand more, and together we can help make this all better.
Yeah, that's the vision. And I think we talked a little bit before we came on, we're looking at everybody from somebody who's maybe retired after a career of service and looking to get back now to a youth of 18, 19, just out of high school, maybe not knowing where to go in terms of a career. And so we're open to that. We spent a lot of time developing a job description. We're still working on it. We're looking at hiring as many as a dozen of these aides. So this is a large commitment in resources and everything on the city. But can you talk a little bit more about the role, the difference that these aides can make, and the things that they could take off the plate, maybe of our other officers?
Sure. Well, like you had mentioned before, this isn't a new concept. It's just new to Harrisburg. Actually, other local municipalities have civilian roles. Lancaster has 40 civilian positions which help assist, like community service aides. We go larger municipalities and boroughs, of course, but in Baltimore and Orlando and big cities, Atlanta has over 100. These are places that have adopted this, and this is something that Harrisburg's looking to do. And the value in which could take off of officers' plates are, report writing. It's the initial conversations with people, perhaps in the lobby, finding out who they should talk to. Again, if we're already short officers and the civilians understand the roles and responsibilities, they will be able to better assist. I just don't get police-related matters. I get calls about Comcast. I get calls about parking. I get calls about, codes issues. So imagine having those officers are dealing with the same thing when they should be responding to people who actually have needs that are life or death or going to other situations. And again, it's not anyone's fault. It's just a lack of understanding. Civilians can help assist with those things so that officers can actually respond to more calls. That's one thing that we hear a lot. Why aren't the officers not responding? Why are they not coming? Well, because they're dealing with a lot of calls. And so if we can help free that up, those things will be really beneficial. There's a lot of tech services that comes into play. Officers work computers in the cars. They assist with radios. There's a lot with vehicle maintenance. There's also when there's traffic accidents or scenes, they could help, take some pressure off of some of the officers by maybe helping control traffic to a degree or special events so officers could actually do investigative work or assist on other calls. It's really endless. I know this is a consistent, these are kind of constant changes, and we just have to see where this plays out. But really, again, business checks, the commitment to the community is really there. Those quality of life issues are really at the heart of what this position is. And if we're able to address that, and we'll work more with the youth, work more with the community policing unit, build those relationships with Boys and Girls Clubs and Salvation Armies and other community groups that are already doing those types of things, I think this really would have helped.
Yeah, well, you said it. Quality of life issues are really at the core of community policing, and this is a means of having our police department as a whole be even better connected to the community, more reflective of the community, open up opportunities for the community within the department, and help us build those connections and bridges. That's what we're all trying to do. We had a previous show where we talked a little bit about the co-responders and crisis intervention training and our new partnership there with the county. We mentioned at the beginning of the show the new crime analyst position that will be in this division. These are a lot of changes, and I think it's a real testament to the engagement and the interest that we've seen from the public, especially over the past year, as there's been this national conversation about how we can improve policing and make our communities safer. So I'm going to end with a final reflection from each of you, if that's okay. Just a short thing. Same question for each of you. I'll start with you, Lieutenant. But what excites you most about the possibilities for community policing next year in Harrisburg?
To make it short, because I can talk. What excites me the most is probably the ability to bring it may sound corny, but bring the community and the police together more, and maybe get some of these young men and young women from the city to understand that this is a career that's really worth investing in, and maybe just becoming an officer and changing just the outlook of some of these neighborhoods and like the thought process. And that's really what I see. I see the ability to make this thing become normal. It's okay to be a police officer, and it's okay to know a police officer. And for the police side of things, because it goes both ways, it's okay to get out your car and talk to somebody. It's okay to, like, they're playing cards, get over here and like look over the cards and start laughing at, what hand they have. It's okay. That's all okay. So that's what kind of excites me the most about this. It's like, we can do this thing together and make this okay.
Yes, absolutely. And I've heard your personal story. I know how it was something that was a surprise to you to find yourself going in a career in law enforcement. Yes. And hopefully we can open up those possibilities to everyone. Corporal, what excites you potentially the most about community policing?
Yeah, I'm very excited about continuing what we started and getting more out into the community, bridging that gap. We talked before about, the us first them mentality, to completely get rid of that, and which isn't with most people, but there is a certain, people that still have that mentality. We want to completely get rid of that. Looking forward to getting our guys addressing the quality of life issues, which is, like we said earlier, is the backbone of this unit, and getting into the youth, getting into the schools, getting into the basketball games, the football games, and still engaging with them, getting them comfortable with us, excited to build those relationships.
Thank you. And Blake?
I think it's really, again, the commitment of service. On the side of the police vehicles says protect and serve. And I can tell you that every officer, male or female, that I've met has that passion, that commitment to do so. And the community service aides coming alongside, bringing their life experiences to the officers, and the officers, sharing that as well. Together, we can continue to work towards that and move towards a better community as a whole. Really, the opportunity for those civilians, again, who are maybe from the city, maybe not, but to bring their experiences and maybe from where they were to help the officers understand maybe a little bit more on cultural competency of perhaps, my experience, perhaps, from a religious experience or an ethnic experience or whatever that might be, or an experience as a male or, gay or straight or whatever, how that can help shape policing our city as a more diverse place and make everyone feel included, inclusive, and work towards a better city, really.
That's great. It's terrific. I couldn't agree more. I want to thank all of you for sharing those reflections with us. And Momin, we're going to turn to you. I imagine there are some questions for our group. We're coming up on an hour, but what do you have for us?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have a few questions here. First, I'll take it to Lieutenant Hooper. We have a question here about the use of force. Does Harrisburg Police allow for the use of chokeholds?
Earlier, when I was talking about some of the things we had, some of the things we did not do is put total bans. In general, we call them neck restraints. That's what they're really called. Neck restraints are not authorized. The only time a neck restraint is authorized is when it's the last resort and when deadly force would otherwise been authorized. So basically, if you want to put it in layman's terms, if an officer is fighting for his or her life, and it comes down to that, and this is the only thing at their disposal, we're not going to say, no, don't do that. No, that's the last resort. But outside of a last resort and deadly force is authorized, it is not something that is allowed.
All right, next question we have from John. Mayor, he asks, regarding the teenage life that was lost yesterday, we've seen a rise in reported shootings and gunfire incidents in Harrisburg. What is being done about this? And how are you implementing community policing to reduce these potential deadly incidents?
Yeah, well, first let me say it was a tragic loss of life yesterday. I was actually there at the time. I was doing a taping of a talk show on The Voice right there on 5th Street. And it was painful and heartbreaking to see, and unfortunately, it is representative of a larger uptick in violence that we're seeing. I would just answer that by saying that's pretty much all we've been talking about on the show is how we can do better, how we can create more community partnerships, how we can have a greater impact in the community. I want to extend my heartfelt condolences to his family and say we're going to keep working to try and make a difference here in Harrisburg.
And I think we have time for just one more question here. I'll toss this to Blake. This is about community aids. This question here from Michelle. She's asking about empowering neighbors and with these community aids. If I'm understanding this question correctly, will the qualification be that they are from those neighborhoods, and how will they kind of interact to empower those neighbors as well?
Sure. Actually, there's not going to be a requirement that they need to be from a certain neighborhood or district or anything like that. However, the vision is for those aides to be assigned to certain districts so that they can make an investment in the community. Like the mayor had referenced earlier, I'm a one-man person spread across 8 districts. So is Corporal Hammer and Lieutenant Hooper. So our relationships are broad. However, if we can have a more concentrated focus where people are assigned and continue to build those relationships and really dig down deep, that's really going to help provide more context and more information and more resources to those partners who need it the most, and they can understand more as well. So Michelle, that's something that we're really excited about, and that's really going to be a focus of these aids.
Yeah, and since we can hire 12, I mean, certainly we will do our best to see if we can hire people from throughout the city. It's not going to be a requirement, but it certainly would be a good characteristic to have in terms of creating really diverse pool of community service aids. And if people are curious about when they could apply, it has to wait till January. We have to first adopt the budget. But shortly after adopting the budget and early in the new year, we will put the job description online, and it will be a simple application and then an interview process through the city of Harrisburg. This is going to be a solid entry-level job with good benefits and the possibility of career advancement. So I'm excited about it. If you think about it in those terms, adding 12 new jobs at once is really almost unheard of for the city. And it represents a commitment of over $1 million annually for community policing, we're going to be paying the salaries and benefits as well as all the other things that we're doing. And we're able to do that in part because we are making that the priority of this budget. So you're going to see an increase in funding of the police, but it is going to be a focus in our community services and in creating capacity as part of this new vision. So this will be the conversation that the city will be having in November and December, and I'm excited. We'll have everybody back. Maybe we'll do an HR show when we're trying to recruit, and we'll talk a little bit more about the position and specificity then. Thanks.
We'll probably end on this comment here. Michelle says, "Thank you to our community policing officers. We appreciate your work."
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's very nice of Michelle. So very good. Then I want to thank everybody for watching another community conversation here on Zoom and Facebook Live. And we will be back next Friday and every Friday at noon for continued conversations about the city and about how we can make things better for all of you. Until next week, this is Eric Pappenfuss saying stay safe, be well. We'll see you next week.